The dressing room at Highbury fell silent as Arsène Wenger stood before his players, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the young Frenchman who had just walked through the door. It was the summer after Arsenal had won the double, and nobody understood why the manager had signed this winger from Juventus who couldn't score goals. Thierry Henry sat on the wooden bench, his lean frame hunched forward, hands clasped together, trying to ignore the whispers around him. He'd failed in Italy. The Italian press had been ruthless, calling him lightweight, inconsistent, a waste of money. Now, at 21, he was being given another chance, but the weight of expectation felt like concrete blocks tied to his ankles. Wenger approached him after training one afternoon, placing a hand on his shoulder as Henry stared at his boots, still caked with mud from the session. The boss had watched him struggle up front during practice matches, missing chances, looking uncertain, his confidence shattered into fragments. "Thierry, come with me to my office." The walk down the corridor felt eternal. Henry's heart hammered against his ribs. Was this it? Was he being sent back already? Inside the small office, Wenger gestured to a chair and sat opposite him, leaning forward with his elbows on the desk. "Do you know why I brought you here?" Henry shook his head, unable to meet his manager's eyes. "Because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet. In Italy, they tried to make you something you're not, but I know what you can become. I can't score, boss. I'm not a striker. I've never been a proper striker." Wenger smiled, a knowing expression crossing his face. "You're right. You're not a striker. You're going to be something much more dangerous. You have the speed of a winger, the intelligence of a midfielder, and the instinct of a goal-scorer. I'm going to make you a complete forward, Thierry. But you have to trust me, and more importantly, you have to trust yourself." The words hung in the air between them. Henry felt something shift inside his chest, a tiny spark of hope trying to ignite, despite the dampness of doubt. The pre-season came and went. Henry trained with an intensity that surprised his teammates. Dennis Bergkamp, the Dutch master, took him under his wing during sessions, showing him how to use his body, how to time his runs, how to think 3 moves ahead. The Dutchman's patience was endless, his instructions precise and thoughtful. "Don't just run, Thierry. Read the game. Feel where the space will be, not where it is now." They would stay behind after training, Bergkamp feeding balls into channels, Henry running onto them again and again until his lungs burned and his legs felt like jelly. The veteran striker saw something special in the young Frenchman, a raw talent that just needed refinement. The opening match of the season arrived, Leicester City away. Henry sat on the bench, watching as Arsenal dominated possession but struggled to break through. In the 78th minute, Wenger turned to him. "Warm up. You're going on." Henry's stomach lurched. This was it, his chance to prove he belonged. He stripped off his tracksuit, the number 14 on his back catching the afternoon light. As he jogged to the touchline, 40,000 people barely noticed him. He was the unknown signing, the gamble, the project. The ball came to him near the halfway line. Instinct took over. He turned, accelerated past one defender, then another. The goal opened up before him. His right foot connected with the ball, sending it curling towards the far post. Time seemed to slow. The Leicester goalkeeper stretched, fingertips reaching, but the ball nestled into the side netting with a satisfying thud. Henry stood frozen for a heartbeat, unable to process what had just happened. Then his teammates were on him, pulling him into embraces, shouting his name. On the sideline, Wenger allowed himself a small smile, arms still crossed, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. In the dressing room afterwards, the atmosphere had changed. Players who had been skeptical now looked at Henry with renewed interest. Bergkamp patted his back as he passed. "That's just the beginning, Thierry. Just the beginning." But Henry knew the truth. One goal meant nothing. He had to prove it wasn't a fluke, that he could do it again and again. The doubt still gnawed at him during sleepless nights in his London flat, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake from training. The next match came at Highbury against Southampton. The historic stadium was packed, the North Bank singing their hearts out. Henry started on the bench again, watching as Arsenal pressed forward wave after wave. In the second half, Wenger sent him on. This time, there was a murmur of anticipation from the crowd. They'd seen what he could do. 20 minutes later, he'd scored twice. 2 clinical finishes, both from positions Bergkamp had taught him to find. As he celebrated the second goal, pressing his finger to his lips in that gesture that would become iconic, the Highbury crowd erupted. The sound was deafening, a wall of noise that crashed over him like a wave. "Now they're starting to believe in you," Wenger said after the match, that same knowing smile on his face. "I'm starting to believe in myself, boss." The transformation had begun, but Henry didn't know it yet. He didn't know that he would become the greatest striker in Arsenal's history, that his name would be chanted by generations of fans, that the number 14 shirt would become synonymous with greatness. All he knew was that for the first time since leaving Monaco, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The goals kept coming. Match after match, Henry found himself in positions he'd never imagined, exploiting spaces that seemed to open up just for him. By Christmas, he'd already scored 15 goals, more than he'd managed in his entire time at Juventus. The Arsenal fans had adopted him completely, chanting his name from the moment he touched the ball until the final whistle. But success brought its own pressures, ones that weighed on him during the quiet moments. Late one evening, after a midweek match, Henry sat alone in the players' lounge at Highbury, ice pack pressed against his thigh, staring at the tactical board Wenger had left up. Bergkamp walked in, his kit bag slung over his shoulder, and paused when he saw the young striker. "You're thinking too much again," Dennis said, settling into the chair beside him. "I just don't want it to stop. This feeling, these goals. What if I wake up tomorrow and it's all gone?" The Dutchman's expression softened with understanding. "Thierry, greatness isn't about never having doubts. It's about playing through them. Every striker goes through dry spells. The difference is you have something special. You can create goals from nothing. I've played with world-class forwards my entire career, and I'm telling you, you have the potential to be the best I've ever seen." Henry looked at him, searching for any hint of exaggeration, but found only sincerity in Bergkamp's eyes. "The best you've ever seen? That's a lot of pressure, Dennis. Then use it. Let it drive you forward, not hold you back." The season continued its relentless pace. Arsenal were competing on multiple fronts, and Henry was at the heart of everything they did. His partnership with Bergkamp became telepathic, a simple glance, a subtle movement, and they knew exactly what the other would do. The football they produced was breathtaking, a symphony of one-touch passes and devastating runs that left defenders chasing shadows. In the FA Cup quarter-final against Blackburn, Henry received the ball on the left wing, the position where he'd started his career. 3 defenders converged on him, certain they had him trapped against the touchline. What happened next would be replayed thousands of times. He shifted his weight left, then exploded right, leaving the first defender grasping at air. The second lunged in, but Henry was already gone, his acceleration impossible to match. The third tried to show him outside, but Henry cut inside onto his right foot and curled a shot into the top corner from 25 yards. The Emirates stadium hadn't been built yet, but Highbury erupted with a roar that seemed to shake the old stadium's foundations. Henry ran towards the corner flag, sliding on his knees, and pressed his finger to his lips. The gesture had become his signature, a response to the critics who'd once written him off, a message that he'd let his football do the talking. In the dressing room after the match, the atmosphere was electric. Teammates crowded around Henry, reliving the goal, their voices overlapping with excitement. But it was the quiet moment later, as the celebrations died down, that meant the most. Wenger approached him, placing both hands on his shoulders. "That goal, Thierry, that's what I saw in you from the beginning. You're not just scoring goals anymore. You're creating art." The compliment from his mentor, the man who'd believed in him when nobody else did, brought unexpected emotion welling up in Henry's throat. He managed a nod, unable to trust his voice. The season climaxed, with Arsenal returning to Wembley for the FA Cup final. Henry had scored in every round, his confidence now unshakable. As he walked out of the tunnel, the sunlight hitting his face, he thought back to that scared young player who'd arrived from Italy, convinced he'd never make it as a striker. That person felt like a stranger now. The match was tense, physical, both teams desperate for silverware. In the 68th minute, with the score deadlocked, Bergkamp slipped a perfectly weighted pass between two defenders. Henry's run was timed to perfection, staying onside by inches. The goalkeeper rushed out, making himself big, but Henry stayed calm, composed, exactly as Bergkamp had taught him. He dinked the ball over the keeper's diving body, watching it roll towards the goal line in what felt like slow motion. When it crossed, Henry didn't celebrate immediately. He closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him, the roar of the crowd, the weight lifting from his shoulders. His teammates mobbed him, but through the mass of red and white shirts, he caught Wenger's eye on the touchline. The manager raised his hand in a simple salute, a gesture of pride and vindication. They'd both been proved right. The gamble had paid off spectacularly. After the final whistle, with the trophy held aloft and confetti raining down, Henry stood on the Wembley pitch, absorbing everything. Patrick Vieira, the captain, wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "You know what you've done this season. You've announced yourself to the world," Patrick said, his French accent thick with emotion. "You're not just a good player anymore, Thierry. You're becoming something special, something they'll remember forever." "We're just getting started, aren't we?" Henry replied, a grin spreading across his face. "Mon frère, we're just getting started." That summer, as Henry returned to France for a brief holiday, he could walk down the streets of Paris without the shame that had followed him after Italy. Now people recognized him as Arsenal's number 14, the striker who'd scored 30 goals in all competitions in his first full season as a centre-forward. But he knew the truth that outsiders didn't understand. This was just the foundation. Wenger had unlocked something in him, shown him what he could become, but the journey was far from complete. There were heights still to climb, records still to break, moments of magic still to create. The following season transformed Henry from a star into a phenomenon. The Premier League had never seen anything quite like him. His combination of pace, power, and technical brilliance left defenders helpless and managers scrambling to find ways to stop him. But it wasn't just the goals that defined him now. It was the manner in which he scored them. Each strike seemed to carry its own personality, its own story. On a rain-soaked evening at Highbury against Liverpool, Henry received a long ball from the halfway line. Jamie Carragher, one of England's most physical defenders, was tight against him, using every trick in the book to unsettle the Frenchman. Henry controlled the ball on his chest, feeling Carragher's presence behind him like a shadow. In one fluid motion, he spun away, leaving the defender stumbling on the wet grass. The goal opened up before him, Jerzy Dudek advancing quickly. Henry's left foot swung through the ball, sending it arrowing into the net with such precision that the goalkeeper didn't move. He simply stood and watched it fly past him. The celebration was different this time. Henry didn't slide to his knees or press his finger to his lips. He simply stood there, arms outstretched, rain streaming down his face, soaking his red shirt. The image would become iconic, captured by photographers and replayed endlessly. It was the pose of a king surveying his kingdom, and Highbury belonged to him now. In the dressing room, Wenger gathered his players around. His voice was calm, but carried an edge of excitement. What we're building here is special. Thierry is showing the world what's possible when talent meets dedication. But remember, individual brilliance means nothing without the team. Henry nodded, understanding the message. He'd seen talented players destroy themselves with ego, and Wenger was making sure that wouldn't happen to him. The Arsenal way was about collective excellence, about players elevating each other. The Champions League brought new challenges. European defenders were different, more tactical, less forgiving. In a crucial match against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu, Henry faced the legendary defensive partnership of Fernando Hierro and Ivan Helguera. The Spanish giants had prepared specifically to stop him, double-marking him whenever he touched the ball. For 70 minutes, their plan worked. Henry had barely had a sniff of goal. Frustration was building, his touches becoming heavier, his decisions rushed. Bergkamp jogged over during a break in play, placing a hand on his back. "They're scared of you, Thierry. That's why they need two men, which means someone else is free. Trust the team." The words shifted something in Henry's mind. He stopped trying to force things, started moving into positions that drew defenders away, creating space for others. In the 78th minute, his run to the back post pulled both centre-backs with him, leaving Robert Pires free at the edge of the box. Pires scored, and Henry's celebration was as enthusiastic as if he'd scored himself. That night, he learned that greatness wasn't just about goals, it was about impact. The domestic season reached its crescendo with Arsenal going on an extraordinary unbeaten run. Match after match, they refused to lose. Henry was at the peak of his powers, scoring against everyone, from the smallest clubs to the biggest rivals. At Old Trafford, facing Manchester United, he produced a performance that left even Sir Alex Ferguson shaking his head in admiration. United had lined up their most experienced defenders, but Henry was unplayable. His first goal came from a counter-attack, sprinting from inside his own half, the ball seemingly glued to his feet. Gary Neville, one of the finest right-backs in the world, couldn't get near him. His second was a piece of individual genius, cutting in from the left, shifting the ball from left foot to right and back again, sending defenders spinning before slotting home. As he ran to celebrate, pressing his finger to his lips once more, the away end at Old Trafford went berserk. Even some home fans stood and applauded, unable to resist the sheer artistry they'd witnessed. After the match, Neville approached him in the tunnel. "You're something else, mate. Honestly, I've never felt so helpless on a pitch." Henry shook his hand, respecting the honesty. "You made me work for every yard, Gary. That's what makes it special. The respect between rivals, the acknowledgement of excellence, felt more meaningful than any trophy." Henry was no longer just proving people wrong. He was earning universal recognition as one of the world's elite players. Back at the training ground, the younger players watched him with reverence. Cesc Fabregas, a teenage midfielder who'd just broken into the squad, approached Henry nervously after a session. "Thierry, can I ask you something? How do you stay so calm in front of goal? I get so nervous when I have a chance." Henry smiled, remembering his own doubts not so long ago. "Cesc, you want to know the secret. There is no secret. You miss, you learn, you improve. Every goal I've scored came after missing 10 others in training. The difference is, I stopped being afraid of missing. You can't score if you're scared to shoot, but you never seem scared of anything." "I'm scared all the time," Henry admitted, his voice dropping to something more vulnerable. "Scared of letting the team down, scared of injury, scared that one day I'll wake up and the magic will be gone. But I've learned to play through the fear. That's what separates good players from great ones." Fabregas nodded, absorbing the wisdom. Years later, he would remember that conversation as one of the most important of his career. The season ended with Arsenal lifting the Premier League trophy at Highbury. As captain for the day, Patrick Vieira handed it to Henry to hold. The weight of it felt perfect in his hands, the gold gleaming under the stadium lights. He raised it high, and the crowd's roar seemed to lift him off his feet. The Invincibles season arrived like a storm that nobody saw coming. Arsenal went through the entire Premier League campaign without losing a single match, 49 games unbeaten. Henry was the spearhead of this historic achievement, scoring goals that defied logic and physics. But the toll of greatness was becoming visible. His body ached constantly, bruises layered upon bruises from defenders who had no other way to stop him except through brutal force. After a particularly physical match against Bolton, Henry sat in the treatment room, ice packs covering his legs, his face etched with exhaustion. The physiotherapist worked in silence. Understanding that words weren't needed, Wenger appeared in the doorway, his expression concerned. "Thierry, we need to manage your minutes better. You can't play every match." "Boss, I have to. The team needs me. The team needs you healthy, not broken. You're carrying too much on your shoulders." Henry looked up, his eyes revealing the weight he'd been carrying. The expectations, the pressure to perform every single match, the knowledge that millions of people watched him expecting magic every time he touched the ball. "I don't know how to do anything else. When I'm on that pitch, I forget everything. The pressure, the pain, everything. It's the only place where I feel like I can breathe." Wenger sat beside him, the manager and his greatest creation, sharing a moment of quiet understanding. "You've already achieved more than most players dream of in a lifetime. You've broken records, won trophies, become a legend. But Thierry, you're still human, and humans have limits." The conversation stayed with Henry, but he couldn't slow down. The unbeaten run continued, each match bringing them closer to history. At White Hart Lane, facing Tottenham in the North London derby, Henry scored a goal that encapsulated everything he'd become. Receiving the ball near the halfway line, he glided past challenge after challenge, his movement so smooth it looked effortless. As he approached the penalty area, with defenders converging, he shifted the ball onto his right foot and curled it into the far corner with such precision that the goalkeeper didn't move. It was his 100th goal for Arsenal, scored against their fiercest rivals in a stadium that hated him. As the ball hit the net, Henry didn't celebrate immediately. He stood perfectly still, finger pressed to his lips, staring at the Tottenham fans. The gesture was defiant, powerful, iconic. His teammates piled on top of him, but through the mass of bodies, he caught sight of the travelling Arsenal supporters going wild with joy. This was what it meant to be the king at Arsenal. The unbeaten run finally ended, but the legacy was secured. Arsenal had achieved something that would never be repeated in the Premier League. Henry finished as top scorer, player of the year, and the undisputed king of English football. But with success came difficult decisions. Barcelona came calling, offering a return to Spain, a chance to play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. The offer sat on his kitchen table for weeks, unopened, while Henry wrestled with his conscience. Arsenal had made him who he was. Wenger had believed in him when nobody else did. Highbury, soon to be replaced by the Emirates Stadium, had been his home, his sanctuary. One evening, Henry drove to the old training ground, walking through the empty corridors, touching the walls where so many memories had been created. In the home dressing room, he sat in his usual spot, number 14 above his head, and allowed himself to cry. The weight of the decision, the gratitude he felt, the fear of leaving something so perfect, it all poured out in that quiet moment. Eventually, he stayed. One more season, he told himself. One more chance to give Arsenal everything. His final years at Arsenal were bittersweet. The team moved to the Emirates, a magnificent new stadium, but something intangible was lost in the transition. The intimacy of Highbury, where every fan felt close enough to touch the players, couldn't be replicated. Henry continued to score, continued to dazzle, but age and injuries were catching up. The explosive pace that had terrified defenders began to fade, forcing him to rely more on intelligence and positioning. In his last home match at the Emirates, before finally accepting Barcelona's offer, Henry stood on the pitch after the final whistle, unable to leave. Tears streamed down his face as 60,000 fans chanted his name over and over, a crescendo of love and gratitude. Wenger walked onto the pitch and embraced him, two men who had changed each other's lives forever. "You made me believe in myself," Henry whispered. "You made my vision real," Wenger replied, his own eyes glistening. Henry left Arsenal as their all-time leading scorer, with 228 goals. More importantly, he'd transformed what people thought was possible for a striker. He'd combined pace, power, technique, and intelligence in a way nobody had before. The number 14 shirt was retired in his honor, a testament to his legacy. Years later, when he returned to the Emirates as a pundit, sitting in the stands analyzing matches, fans still serenaded him with songs. New generations of supporters, who'd only seen him on YouTube compilations, understood what he meant to the club. The bronze statue outside the stadium, frozen in his iconic celebration pose, stood as a permanent reminder that greatness had walked these grounds. Thierry Henry had arrived at Arsenal as a broken winger who couldn't score. He left as the king, the greatest player to ever wear the red and white. His transformation wasn't just about goals or trophies. It was about a young man finding belief, purpose, and immortality through the beautiful game.